All right, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome into the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7, 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion, Los Angeles Sparks, here on the second night of our comeback to doing the regular stuff here after, again, recapping the entire 2014 WNBA offseason on Sparks Watch 1 year later. Welcome back, folks, to WNBA 365 Off-Season Central. Good evening, folks. Cal McClure joining you here from Studio 121 in San Diego with two different personas tonight. We have a very unhappy and depressed Chris Woodmansey joining us from the International Studios in Anaheim, California, and a very, very hypered and animated and amped up third member of our broadcast team from the studio floor here in San Diego. Chris, I know that you're very disappointed in what happened today with the LA Sparks. Other than that, though, man, how's it going tonight?
Just hanging here.
Tough pill to swallow, man. But, of course, folks, we get to all the big news today. Of course, folks, we had a lot of stuff breaking, of course, during the course of our day, and I'm really surprised that I was able to juggle doing my 9-hour radio shift and still update you folks on Twitter of all the news that went down today, from Chicago signing Courtney Vandersloot to a slew of signings by the Indiana Fever, the Sparks waiving Lindsey Harding, the Liberty re-signing a few players, and a lot of stuff happened, folks, over the course of the day today. We'll get to the headlines, though, today. Re-signings and stuff included for the Chicago Sky, re-signing veteran point guard and three-point shooter Courtney Vandersloot. Indiana Fever today signed pretty much the same amount of people at the Mercury signed on day one. They signed 4 players today, including Brianna, Butler, Sydney Carter, Lynetta, Kizer, and Tyaunna Marshall. The LA Sparks today announced they had waived guard Lindsey Harding to cut $9,000 off team salary. New York Liberty signed San Diego State alum Chelsea Hopkins to a training camp contract. The Phoenix Mercury go international again and sign Marta, Xargay, Casademont. We're probably got that name wrong, folks, as Jessica told me the other night. Try announcing her name and Anita Jacobson-Zagoda's name twice. And then, of course, the Washington Mystics signed former LA Spark guard Armintie Herrington and extended the contract of Ivory Latta. Now, Chris, we'll begin first with the Chicago Sky, Chris. Now, I know, man, that you, me, and Shorty were the lone 3 people on the network, plus Crystal Chris, so all 4 of us jumped on the Sky bandwagon for the postseason, again, with a great run last year. You know, a team that had started off so great, struggled midseason because of Elena Deladon's absence because of her Lyme disease, came back and got to the WNBA Finals, and, of course, Chris, today, locking up a big puzzle piece, one of their main three-point attack shooters in Courtney Vandersloot, had a bit of some injury problems, Chris, early in the year because of a hip and knee problem. But, Chris, what is Chicago retaining here other than a three-point shooter and a veteran that knows the game very well in Courtney Vandersloot? Thoughts about the signing or what?
Just a very great addition because she doesn't have to shoot the three-point. Just a very great addition.
Chris, it's not necessarily an addition to the team. It's just a re-signing of Courtney Vandersloot's expiring contract. But, though, man, you are right, though. I mean, they do have, you know, a few three-point, you know, on-the-mark targets between Sloot, Allie Quigley, and, of course, Chris, when Deladon went down, you had other puzzle pieces fill the void. You had Big Sil battling her problems, too, and still getting through the season. You had Jamira Faulkner light up L.A. at Staples Center this year. Then, of course, you had Sloot when she wasn't hurt. Then you had Allie Quigley, Chris, the reigning 6'1" of the year, off the bench. So, of course, Chris, Chicago making the right move here. Then, of course, moving ahead, Chris, to the Indiana Fever, who were very active today, the busiest being the Hive today, signing Brianna Butler, re-signing Sydney Carter and Lynetta Kizer, and Tyaunna Marshall, all to contracts today. Then, of course, Chris, the news that broke your heart and made you cry river today, of course, the Sparks waiving guard Lindsey Harding following 2 seasons with Los Angeles, coming over from Atlanta via free agency. Now, Chris, sadly, man, we knew, though, that the hourglass ran out, Chris, because of how poor Lindsey's play was from 2013 to this year. You know, really, Chris, lost her confidence, lost her jump shot, lost her mojo, and Chris, for the first time in her pro career, losing her starting job, put on the bench, you know, midway through the season. So, Chris, I guess, man, I know that you're heartbroken and you're upset about this, man. But Chris, I need you to be honest here, man. You know, what did you see though that went wrong for Lindsey's game? That basically, Chris, was the final, you know, sand in the hourglass for LH10 in Los Angeles this past season.
She just lost her mojo from starting five, then she just lost her mojo and then just went to a bench roll.
Chris, I think that's what we're getting at again is, you know, Lindsey, Chris, being a starter, for her whole career, being drafted by Phoenix, not signing, redrafted by Minnesota, started there, and then went to Atlanta, started there, and then Chris came to LA for 1 year, started, this year started halfway through, then of course, injuries is one factor for other players, getting some players in, and then of course, depth, and also, her game was not there. This was probably, out of all of her career, Chris, out of her 8 years, probably her worst career year in regards to her stats, and also being banged up a bit, a minor foot problem in late July that, hindered her play towards the end of the season. And Chris, even when she came into the game off the bench, she was still lost because, Chris, when you move a player that is always a starter, that is in that flow, in that rhythm for so many years, and they move them to the bench, Chris, it's tough for them to adjust. And Chris, I think that when that happened, that's when Lindsey lost everything. She lost her confidence, lost her, didn't have her confidence up. She lost her shot, lost her mojo, the whole shebang, Chris. So I guess, man, my final thought here is when you convert a starter who's been starting their whole career and you make them into a bench player when they're not in the flow or rhythm of coming off the bench, it's going to screw up their mindset and screw up how they play. And that's exactly what happened with LH10. So, of course, the Sparks today waiving Lindsey Harding, which cut off $9,000 of salary off of the LA Sparks' contract book for next season. Minor move today, the New York Liberty signed for training camp San Diego State Aztec alum Chelsea Hopkins to a contract, who was with the Stars during camp last year before she was cut by San Antonio. And the international team, Chris, the Mercury, who already has one form player, again, who we do not know if it's Anita Jacobson-Zagota or Annette Jacobson-Zagota. They have no idea what it is. Signed her last year, and of course today signing Marta. Yeah, this is going to be a killer. I even told this to Jess, who's going to watch our show tonight, that this name will kill everybody for a while. It's going to kill everyone again. Marta, Xargay, Casademont to a contract, and of course, Chris, the other back to be in the hive today, the Washington Mystics announced signing of Armintie Herrington and extending the contract of Ivory Latta. Now, Chris, Minty, as we brought up last night, again, Chris, was owed $10,000 in salary this season if the Sparks retained her. So, Chris, shaving her off of the books, gave value by $10K, but of course, Chris, now, man, you've got a pretty good, solid backcourt in Washington that Albert Lee can go attend to, and I'm sure he's going to love it when you have, Chris, when you have a veteran, like Minty, who's been on experienced teams like Atlanta, getting to the finals a few times, winning the Eastern Conference title in 2 tries before she, made the move to Los Angeles after coming to Atlanta from Chicago when she was drafted there in 2009 or 2010. So, Chris, I guess, man, what is Washington getting? I know, first of all, man, they're getting a big puzzle piece for their backcourt. That's one deal. But what else are they getting other than a tenacious defender that plays every possession like it's her last out there on defense? Chris, what is Washington getting in Armintie Herrington for the 2015 summer?
Very great on defense. They can get the ball and can make great plays and can probably turn around for the Washington Mystics.
Yeah, Chris, I think that this was probably the smartest move that Mike Tebow and Ted Leonatis, the owner of Monumental Sports, has made in trying to get some sort of veteran leadership. Because Chris, Albert Lee told me this repetitively over the phone a few days ago, is that the Mystics just didn't have and don't have that veteran leader on the roster for players like Latta, like Dolson and Hartley and Emma Miesemann, where now they have Herrington it's walked the road, going on 9 years next year to the finals with Atlanta, deep postseason runs, Chris, with the Mystics. I've not gotten there in quite some time. And of course, Chris, the Mystics again extending the contract today of their star player, Ivory Latta, today. Multi-year extension, of course, Chris. We saw this with the Stars bringing back Danielle Robinson. I think without Ivory, Chris, if Ivory would have left for someone else, that Washington would not have had that star player. I mean, we know that they let Mo Curry go for free agency to Phoenix, and I think, Chris, that with Latta staying and still being that tremendous three-point shooter she is, man, it's going to be fun to see how well her and Herrington do play in the backcourt. Chris, thoughts about the Mystics retaining their star player in Ivory Latta for a multi-year extension?
Just a very great extension to probably, like I said earlier, since they got signing Armintie Herrington and now re-signing Ivory Latta, they're probably heading in the right direction.
Yeah, Chris, I think that the Mystics, I mean, they've been there, they've been in the middle of the pack for the last few years in the WNBA Eastern Conference. And again, you know, a team that came on strong, but again, just didn't really have that one veteran puzzle piece in their, on their lineup card to insert into the lineup, folks. Again, rehashing our headlines, folks, again, from today. Very busy day in the WNBA here for another day here of WNBA 365. Recapping our headlines again, the Chicago Sky re-signed Courtney Vandersloot. Indiana signed Brianna, Butler, Sydney Carter, Lynetta, Kizer, and Tyaunna Marshall. The Sparks waived Lindsey Harding. The New York Liberty signed San Diego State Aztec alum Chelsea Hopkins. The Phoenix Mercury signed MXC. We'll just call that MXC, folks. You can figure out her name later. And the Mystics signed Armintie Herrington and extended the contract of Ivory Latta today on contracts. Those are your moves made today in the WNBA for this day in the offseason. Chris, not much else to get to on the home front with any moves today. Again, we've talked to them. Now, again, Chris, we're going to go back to Phillips Watch, or Aussie Watch, Chris. One of those two. Again, Aaron Phillips, Chris, rumored to have signed with a team. Still unknown at this point, Chris. I have been getting bugged repeatedly, Chris, by fans from the Sparks, and have been bugging my birdie in the front office, Chris, to tell me something. Chris, last news I got, the Sparks remain in the hunt, but again, Chris, this has been kind of a bad situation to be caught in, Chris, because we've heard reports that the deal was confirmed, hasn't been confirmed, hasn't signed the contract. So, Chris, are you a bit confused in regards to this entire Aaron Phillips saga, that we've heard that it's been signed, not been signed, we don't know who's involved? I mean, kind of like, Chris, who do you believe, I guess, in this case?
Yeah, just don't know what's going on. Then the Sparks just probably just getting rid of their, like I saw Sue Favorite said, that probably they're just getting rid of their weak links and probably just making a big old splash.
Now, Chris, if we're talking, Chris, I mean to cut you off, man, but if we're talking weak links here, why did the Sparks resign Nikki Green? I mean, we pretty much knew. Even my little birdie from office said, Chris, Green's up for cuts, and she'll probably get cut. And then we heard that they have to resign. It's like, what are you doing? I thought you were going to cut her off the salary to make some sort of splash. Now, Chris, last I heard from the Sparks front office, the Sparks have $19,000 off the books from getting rid of Herrington and Harding's contract. And Chris, as well, man, a great point brought up here by Shorty Mama 24, who brought us the news and brought me the news about Harding's waive. Chris, was are you at all surprised, man, that the two players on the roster last year that had exclusive, very close-knit ties to Carol Ross were both let go the same offseason?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny, man, how that works sometimes where, yeah, Chris, as Minty said during training camp, that people think you're crazy to go back and play for your college coach. But, Chris, hey, when you have those kind of connections, man, when you're able to, when you can play for your college coach or even work for someone that Chris, when you have that connection, like I do with Candace Parker and Candace Wiggins, Chris, you feel more comfortable. And I guess it's why the Sparks, for one, brought Herrington in, and also why Lindsey may have stayed past last season, because of how much they knew the Ross system and Ross philosophy. And of course, Chris, Chris, as I brought up here back in July when I was solo here when the Sparks fired Ross, I did mention, if you folks go back and watch the show again, that I said that Harding and Herrington were probably going to be the first 2 players gone during the offseason because of how much they, expressed allegiance and how much they loved Coach Ross's philosophy. And I guess, Chris, that's where the chips fell into place, was when Ross got fired. I think we all knew that Herrington and Harding would be the first 2 players gone off the roster because, again, Chris, they have that tie to Carol Ross in her system. So that's what occurred. But again, folks, Sparks waiving Lindsey Harding today, and of course yesterday signing Mariana Tolo, a 6'5" center from Australia, and Nikki Green, 6'4" center, going to her second year from Penn State. Chris, looking back over some other small stuff over the past transactions here, again, not much else, more so signings of former players, training camp contracts, and of course the big hoopla about Diana Taurasi sitting out next season. We'll get to that probably later on this week, but again, recapping today's headlines again, folks. The Chicago Sky re-signed Courtney Vandersloot. Indiana signs Brianna, Butler, Sydney Carter, Lynetta, Kizer, and Tyaunna Marshall. Sparks waive Lindsey Harding. Liberty signed Chelsea Hopkins. Phoenix signs MXC. Washington will when the Mystics sign Armintie Herrington and Ivory Latta. Chris, I guess, man, we'll just kind of go back and look around, man. Now, I know that a lot of people, Chris, we'll go back to a couple days ago, Chris, when the Fever re-signed Jeanette Poland. Now, Chris, Jeanette Poland, in spite of what other fans may have heard, what I have gathered from my inside sources with the Sparks front office, Jeanette Poland was LA's #1 target this offseason via free agency because of her style of play and also what she did for the Fever in 2012, coming back from one injury, eating up minutes and leading that team, along with Tamika Catchings, to a 2012 WNBA title. Chris, I know, man, that it's tough to sort of say, where chips fall, I guess, in this case. But Chris, and also, folks, I will say this here. This is a quick update too from the Sparks front office as well. Last contact I had with them, I was informed, and Chris, I'll rattle off these names for you. Folks, the other options the Sparks are weighing via the Sparks front office to me. Other options other than Aaron Phillips include Megan Simmons, Antonita Slaughter, Adia Mathis, and Sydney Spencer, of one-time LA Spark during Candace Parker's first 2 years in 08 and 09. Now, Chris, Megan Simmons was actually the #2 on the list because she was right below Jeanette Poland. Now, Chris, again, man, Simmons, though, is in a different boat because she's been playing overseas, over in Romania, since she was cut by the New York Liberty after the draft last year. Now, Chris, I know that me, Tranisha Hardy, were going, Lollapalooza on Twitter with the hashtag of Megan Simmons to LA. Now, Chris, I know that myself, Shorty, and Crystal all agreed on having Simmons come to LA for at least a training camp shot. Chris, out of those players I just listed, between Megan Simmons, between Antonita Slaughter, as we know was the Sparks' number 35 pick in last year's draft, former Sparks Adia Mathis and Sydney Spencer, Chris, who are the Sparks more likely to bring in after training camp of those players I just listed, and why?
I think probably Megan Simmons.
Need a reason why, though, man?
Since she's a great three-point shooter, and it'll be a great addition to the Sparks, having her, since the Sparks have been lacking on three-point shooting.
Chris, I'm going to go off the board here with these 5 players that's listed, Chris. Okay, I'm going to say, Chris, that the Sparks offer all of them training camp contracts. They all come for camp, Chris. I'll say this. Call me crazy, folks. Simmons is coming, but, folks, Sydney Spencer also comes. I always say that, not because she's an Aussie and I love all the Aussie players in the WNBA, but you're talking about bringing in a veteran leader. I know she's had problems with injuries in the past, but, Chris, it can't hurt to have some veteran on your roster because, Chris, if Elena Beard does not re-sign this offseason and she's gone, you have no true veteran leadership okay, I know that Parker's going to be going into her 8th year, Chris, but I'm talking like players with double-digit experience, like Elena Beer, that has 12 years under her belt, Chris. Sydney Spencer would give you that veteran leadership, Chris. Chris Slaughter is a maybe, because we know that her defense was on point with Louisville, and it was a bit alarming to see her cut, though, during camp by the Sparks, because normally you would at least give the draft pick some sort of leash and leeway. And Chris, I think, though, man, that Adia Mathis was basically in Obdi and Green's position 2 years ago. I mean, she played, you know, a reduced role, you know, came in that infamous game with Tulsa when the Sparks were down 19, when they were still down by 18, and she had a turnover and 2 shots blocked. So, Chris, I think, man, it's Simmons and Spencer that come in over the offseason. At least, Chris, I think, though, man, at least offer training camp. That's all I can say for it, is offer them training camp contracts, Chris. Am I right, or what do you think needs to be done by the Sparks with these players that are listed on this list I got today?
Just get someone good, like some three-point shooting, some defense, and just turn the team around.
So in that case, we would be adding in Anthony Slaughter for her defense, and we can use hashtag welcome to the Slaughterhouse after she has a block next season. And no, Chris, you can't use that hashtag. I already trademarked it during her time at Louisville, so sorry, dude. But again, folks, rehashing the headlines for the day again. The Chicago Sky re-signed Courtney Vandersloot. Much needed move. The Fever bring in a few players. Brianna Butler, Sydney Carter, Lynetta Kizer, and Tyaunna Marshall re-signed. The Sparks waiving Lindsey Harding after 2 years in Los Angeles. The Liberties signed Chelsea Hopkins. Phoenix signs MXC. And Washington signs Armintie Herrington and extend the contract of Ivory Latta. Chris, I fell asleep early last night for once, and like the first time forever, Chris, and I replayed the show, Chris, and I ran that entire Diana Taurasi scenario through again, man, because it's been on my mind, you know, fresh ever since I broke the news, and like you always do, break the old news again to me when I already knew about it, is not, Chris, okay, I'll steer away here from this not being a tank job, but Chris, I think, man, that it's important to know that Diana has gotten the full support, Chris, of both the WPA, the WNBA's Players Association's president, Chris, plus Laurel J. Ritchie has given her full consent for Diana's decision to sit. So, Chris, why are we still thinking that this is Phoenix Tank 2.0? And Chris, she's got the backing of not only me because I'm in love with her as a great player, and you hate her guts for no reason, but that she has the backing, though, Chris, of the Players Union plus the league commissioner to sit out next season, Chris. So why are we still making this a big deal about this being Phoenix Tank Job 2.0, and why? What do you think here about Diana having the support, Chris, of not only fellow players, but the union and the president of the league for a decision to sit out next season? What are your thoughts?
Just very good to have support, since a lot of people are thinking it's Phoenix 2.0 tank.
Yeah, Chris, I think, man, if you've got the WPA's, you know, president of the Players Union, plus the league president / commissioner in your back pocket, man, yeah, you're sitting pretty. Now, Chris, I wanted to get to this, though, because we said this, though, late last night, which was about, will future players that play overseas, Chris, do the same thing? And, Chris, in my mind, I'll say it here, I'll raise my hand and say it, that, Chris, we will see more players. Candace Parker, Maya Moore, you know, maybe BG. You know, Chris, we're going to see other star players, sadly, Chris, take the year off because of the Brinks trucks, the credit cards, the money that are being offered, Chris, because, man, again, Chris, stupid question. Are you going to take $110,000 to sit there on your phone and not pay attention to me, or take $1.5 million to sit there and not pay attention to me on the network, Chris? What are you taking and why?
Take the money and run.
Which money? $110,000 or $1.5 million?
$1.5 million.
Good choice. You're not as dumb as some people think you are for some reason. But Chris, I think, man, everyone would do that. Chris, if I was offered, the California lottery Powerball jackpot of $450 million, Chris, to leave my house and just leave the network, I would do it. I mean, I would totally leave this chair with $450 million, Chris, and be on my merry way because I'd be set for life, basically, Chris. And Chris, this is something, though, man, that all pro athletes, as I said as a former athlete myself, Chris, for 15 years when I played sports, Chris, is you have to think about your future. Chris, I know firsthand, I know the toll overseas play does to you. I played 3 years of overseas baseball, Chris. It is not only tough physically on the body, but mentally it's tough, Chris, to adapt to new time zones, new cities, for either 2 weeks or a full 6 months, Chris. It is a major battle that you endure playing your sport overseas, Chris. And not only that, man, I wasn't paid to play, but Chris, it was a rewarding experience to at least do it, to represent Team USA and play over in Japan, in Mexico, down under in Australia, Chris. It's been fun to do, or was fun to do, and Chris, that's a factor, man, that I think that people still don't take into consideration, Chris, of just how much you get beat up physically and mentally, Chris, when you play your sport, not only year-round, Chris, but playing it overseas, too, man. It's a huge battle that you endure. And, folks, if you want more, go to my sports broadcasting website, which is calamac.wix.com/calamac-sports. I wrote an entire blog about the dangers year-round sport athletes play when you play 12 months out of the year. And Chris, as I said, man, I still, Chris, feel the effects of playing my sport year-round, Chris. Between me being 6'4" at age 20, man, but I mean, I deal with knee problems, bad back, ankle problems, hip problems, Chris. So, Chris, basically, Chris, I'm saying is, not only is it a grind to play for 4 months of the year over here, Chris, but to do it, though, for 8 months overseas, with more money, yes, but of course, Chris, that ongoing battle you face. I mean, Chris, I said my piece, but Chris, I know that you didn't play sports too long in your career, but Chris, what would you imagine, though, you would feel like, though, playing an entire high school baseball season, for example, then doing what I did 3 years in a row and playing internationally in Japan, Mexico, and Australia?
I would have been just exhausted and just probably want to make it.
And Chris, how I made it through those 3 years, man, I don't know, and I don't really want to know, because it was probably the toughest 3 years I went through, between playing, high school season for a year, for the spring, and then getting back in shape for the travel, to Japan, Chris, which got me sick from LAX. I mean, Chris, to be on a plane for 16 hours plus a 6-hour bus ride. I mean, Chris, I had true story here, folks. I had a full 24-hour travel day when I went to Japan in 2008. I had a 14-hour flight from LAX to Japan, and then a 6-hour bus ride to the team, or to a meeting place for a banquet, and then, Chris, a 4-hour trip to get to where I was staying with a family, Chris. It was by far the toughest, awful day, Chris. Not only that, man, I got sick on the flights, which was even worse in that case. So, Chris, obviously, man, it takes a toll. And even, man, when I went to Australia, that was an 18-hour flight to Sydney. But, Chris, what was worse, man, was the jet lag. Chris, I was awake. I was nocturnal. I was awake at 5 a.m. and sleeping at 3:30 in the afternoon, because the time change is the biggest pain in the ass for athletes that play overseas, Chris. And, man, that's one deal, though, why I'm also up a lot, Chris, because you never know when Candace Parker's going to have one of her Q&As on Twitter, as I know very well, man, at 3:30 in the morning, as I've known in the past. So, Chris, I'll let you finish here, man, before we close up the night. But again, Chris, could you imagine seeing yourself playing sports if you played past, when you were younger, playing your sport over here than playing overseas later on in the same year?
No, I can't see myself doing it.
And I am still amazed that I made it through 3 years. And my dad has been coaching international baseball for the past 10 years. Can't believe he's been doing it, too, at age 56. But with that, folks, we will put a cherry on top for tonight on Tuesday, February 10th. here tonight again, rehashing the headlines from the day. The Chicago Sky re-signing Courtney Vandersloot. Indiana signs Brianna, Butler, Sydney Carter, Lynetta, Kizer, and Tyaunna Marshall. Sparks waive Lindsey Harding. New York Liberty sign Chelsea Hopkins to a contract. Phoenix signs MXC. And Washington signs Armintie Herrington and extending the contract of Ivory Latta. Chris, as we put a couple cherries on top of the night, man, your final thoughts on day 2 of the off-season talk here on the network. Your final thoughts are what?
Just a very busy day today around the WNBA. Just very busy.
We should also mention, folks, that knock to the Atlanta Dream. You are on the clock. You are still the lone team to have not made any moves public. So please, if you can help us out, make a move tomorrow or sometime in the coming days. Now, folks, quickly here, a quick program alert for you folks. We're going to be off next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I'm going to be on a much-needed vacation to Denver, Colorado to escape what has been havoc with my work schedule for the past couple days. I'm going to be taking a break to be with a fellow P announcer of mine up in Denver to see an Avalanche hockey game, so we'll have no programming. We may have some programming, folks, perhaps. We'll see what happens later on this week, but again, no shows next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, perhaps. We'll see if I can do one from Denver, perhaps, next week. But with that, folks, until tomorrow night back here at 10 o'clock p.m., have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thank you all for coming, and good night now. This has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We are LA, and we are the WNBA. For a tuckered out Rodney on the floor here in studio, and still the press, Chris Mancy in Anaheim, Cal McClurkin in San Diego signing off. See you folks tomorrow night. Bye-bye.